Hi, my name is Gus, and I'll be giving my tragedy text presentation on not a text as in a book, but on the movie Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan is a movie that came out in 1998, and it was directed by Steven Spielberg, and it was created in Universal City, California by the companies DreamWorks, Paramount Pictures, and Amblin Entertainment. It's rated R, and several notable actors include Tom Hanks, Matt Damon, and Vin Diesel. So the movie begins with Private Ryan when he's old, many years after World War II is already over, going to the graveyard Colleville-sur-Mer, which is basically the memorial in Europe where they honor the American men that died overseas during World War II. And then after that scene, it cuts to the invasion of Normandy by America back in World War II, where it follows Captain John Miller as they storm the beaches of Normandy during D-Day, and eventually, after a very brutal scene, take control of the beaches. So after this scene, it cuts back to America and shows the scene with the general, where he finds out that a mother has three of her four sons died in World War II, the last of which dying on D-Day. And he decides to send out a mission to save Private Ryan. And he asks Captain John Miller, who's played by Tom Hanks, to take a small group of men behind enemy lines to find Private Ryan. And they go through the countryside and they're surrounded by Germans and they run into several skirmishes, several die. And eventually they find Private Ryan after a lot of asking around from American battalions. They eventually find him. And it ends with a brutal scene of them defending a bridge before Private Ryan is able to go home. And Captain John Miller ends up dying. But before he dies, he says to Private Ryan, "Earn it," which basically implies that he needs to make it. He needs to earn the fact that so many men sacrificed so much and died for him to have the opportunity to go home. Not just for him, but for him and his mother, and that he has to earn it. And then after that scene, it cuts back to Private Ryan many years after World War II, where he's at the graveyard, and he's basically just dealing with the existential question of whether he lived a good life and whether he actually earned it, like Captain Miller suggested he has to. So that's basically the movie. Saving Private Ryan was originally wanted to be created by Steven Spielberg as a tribute to his father, but another notable thing that was going on at the time the film was released was this was kind of towards the beginning or in the midst of terrorist scares and terrorist attacks in America, and also 3 years prior to 9/11. And although 9/11 hadn't happened yet, there were still rumors, and it was just fear of overseas was kind of a bigger issue back then. And this film, I think, could have been commenting on, or that could have influenced the creation of this film, because this was about victory overseas and victory to end oppression, which is kind of the same ideas that people talk about with the war that we have against terror. And I think that is definitely portrayed a little bit in this film, but it's not a main feature of the film, and I'm not sure that it really plays into this text as a tragedy necessarily. So, I've seen the movie Saving Private Ryan several times, and each time I forget how actually sad it is and how hard it is to watch. And in some ways, it is probably the most tragic movie I've ever seen, but not necessarily tragic in the sense that is referred to when discussing ancient Greek tragedy. So basically, I'm going to say that this piece is not a tragedy because although it's really sad, I don't think it meets any of the requirements or characteristics of tragedy. To examine this further, I'm going to be mainly using the arguments put forth about, or the definitions put forth by Aristotle about what tragedy is. And so first, I don't think Saving Private Ryan meets the 6 characteristics laid out by Aristotle for what a tragedy is. And these characteristics include things such as imitation, serious implications, it has to be complete and possess magnitude, language, true tragedy, and purification. Now, I'm not going to discuss all of those, but I'll look at several of them and show why this doesn't fit with a tragedy. The second way is it doesn't fit the plot requirements that tragedy has to have completely. And I'll get more in depth in this later also, but basically what that means is that there are certain aspects of the plot of a tragedy that make it a tragedy. And I don't think this movie really meets those plot characteristics. And finally, maybe the most important part is that there isn't a tragic hero in this piece. A hero that has some tragic flaw that then causes him to realize a mistake or come into knowledge after making this big mistake. I don't think this movie has one of those, and I'll talk about that more in detail later as well. Another aspect of Saving Private Ryan that I don't think meets up to Aristotle's characteristics of tragedy are language. Aristotle says that language must be appropriate for each part of the play, and basically that's referring to the different choruses and the different spoken parts and everything, and how they must have different rhythms and melodies. And Saving Private Ryan is a modern film, and that is something that is not really a technique that's not really used in modern film. And so it's just kind of not really relevant to this particular movie, and that's one other way that I don't think it fits the qualifications as a tragedy.
You want to explain the math of this to me? I mean, where's the sense of risking the lives of the 8 of us to save one guy?
20 degrees. Anybody want to answer that?
Driving. Think about the poor bastard's mother.
Hey, Doc, I got a mother, all right? I mean, you got a mother, Sarge has got a mother. I mean, shit, I bet even the captain's got a mother. Well, maybe not the captain, but the rest of us got mothers.
There's not a reason why, there's but to do and die.
What the fuck is that supposed to mean, Corporal, huh? We're all supposed to die, is that it?
Upham's talking about our duty as soldiers.
Yes, sir.
We all have orders and we have to follow them. That supersedes everything, including your mothers.
Yes, sir, thank you, sir.
Even if you think the mission's FUBAR, sir?
Especially if you think the mission's FUBAR.
What's FUBAR? Oh, it's German.
So this short clip gives a pretty good representation for what the dialogue and the just talking scenes are like throughout the movie. And this kind of just shows that it doesn't fit that Aristotelian qualifications for what a tragedy has to be. It's just very casual and very normal, and it's not very dramatic in that way. A quick way that the movie doesn't meet a qualification of tragedy is in ancient Greek tragedy, violence was usually not portrayed on the stage. It was just kind of implied that it happened, and they would go off stage and it was implied that the violence would happen, and they'd come back and you would know what happened, but you wouldn't actually see the violence. In Saving Private Ryan is kind of the exact opposite of that, where it's very visceral and puts the violence at the forefront of the film. One final way that I don't think that this meets the characteristics that Aristotle lays out for tragedy is through its ability to complete and possess magnitude. Aristotle talks about how it can't just be a series of episodes, but it has to be a whole piece with a beginning, middle, and end, and it uses the idea of imitation, where the director, in this case, the director can't just copy everything related to the topic that he's speaking on, but it has to represent the aspects of the film which give form to universal truths. And that's one of the passages that we looked at from Aristotle. And he basically said, and that basically means that it has to cut out all the fat and just get straight to the point of the universal truth. And I don't think that Saving Private Ryan does a great job of that with all of its war scenes and all of its, not to say that the war scenes are fluff, but I don't think they necessarily get to the point of the movie or say the universal truth that the author is getting to. The second reason I don't think that Saving Private Ryan is a tragedy by the classical and ancient definition for what tragedy is through its plot. Aristotle said that plot was the most important of the qualifications for ancient tragedy, and all plot has some pathos, which basically means suffering, but it can also include ideas of reversal and recognition. And reversal is basically when a character, you think that something is going to go in one way, but then it happens in a different way. And this is, I think, sometimes can get mixed up with irony, but it's not irony. It's called reversal, where, yeah, you think it's going to go some way, but then it goes another way. And Saving Private Ryan doesn't have any good examples of that. And it wasn't really included in the movie. Similarly to reversal, recognition, I don't think, has a very good example within Saving Private Ryan. The best example I could think of is at the end when Private Ryan is questioning his life, whether or not he earned the gift of life that was given to him by Captain Miller and the rest of the crew that died on the mission to save him. And he's asking his wife, please tell me that I'm a good man. Have I been a good man? But I think that this realization that he has earned it is not necessarily a good example of recognition, because recognition is generally induces pity and fear and is a horrible scene to witness, whereas this scene, although it's sad and has certain elements of tragedy, it's in the end a good moment in the movie where he realizes, and it's a happy moment rather than a coming to terms with some ignorance that you had. He is coming to a realization that helps him feel more peaceful about his life. So I'll play that clip now to illustrate that.
What, sir? James. Earn this. Earn it. My family is with me today. They wanted to come with me. To be honest with you, I wasn't sure how I'd feel coming back here. Every day, I think about what you said to me that day on the bridge. I've tried to live my life the best I could. I hope that was enough. I hope that at least in your eyes, I've earned what all of you have done for me.
James. Captain John H. Miller.
Tell me I've led a good life.
What?
Tell me I'm a good man.
You are.
So yeah, this scene, although it is sad, shows his closure of coming back to the site in Normandy and the graves, and seeing Captain Miller's grave, and just telling him that he's tried to live his best life, and then getting that recognition from his wife that he's been a good man. Although it's sad, I think that this is in the end a happy scene where he gets closure on an issue rather than what's typically known in Greek theater as the recognition in the plot. And I think that this is the closest thing to recognition, but it doesn't fall under the category of recognition in Saving Private Ryan. So that's just another way I don't think that Saving Private Ryan meets the qualifications. A final way that I don't think that the movie Saving Private Ryan meets ancient Greek tragedy, and why I would say that it is not a tragedy, is because of the lack of the tragic hero. In ancient Greek tragedy, there was always a tragic hero who, to quote what Aristotle said, was a great man who is neither a paragon of virtue and justice, nor undergoes the change to misfortune through any real badness or wickedness, but because of some mistake. End quote. And Aristotle, and this basically means that the tragic hero is someone who is striving to be better because he's not a paragon of virtue and justice, but he can't undergo the change to become better because of some tragic flaw or a big mistake that he makes. And this mistake was known as a hamartia, and the Greek word basically means flaw or error. And that, I don't think that Saving Private Ryan has that. Another way that Saving Private Ryan is tricky is because although the main character is Private Ryan, he's not in a good deal of the movie, and it feels like the main character is actually Captain Miller. And even though neither of them, I think, have a tragic mistake that they make, they both live very good lives and they die honorably. And Saving Private Ryan actually doesn't die in war, he dies of old age, like we just saw in the last scene we looked at. And so I don't think that he makes I don't think that either of these characters fit the qualifications of a tragic hero.
What's the rallying point? Anywhere but here!
So this clip of Captain Miller leading the D-Day beach invasion really bravely, and kind of not just sending the men out to do stuff, but him actually getting down in the trenches with them and doing it and leading them through the really dangerous invasion, shows how I don't think Captain Miller fits the qualifications of a tragic hero, because he is just a really good man and a really good leader already. And then that last scene that we looked at with older Private Ryan, where he comes to terms and realizes that he's led a good life and he's kind of questioning that, is another. It shows that I don't think Private Ryan fits those qualifications either. And Private Ryan doesn't fit these qualifications either because he says it himself, and his wife agrees with him that he has had a good life, and that rather than having some tragic flaw or mistake that he makes that allows him not to come into that virtue or be a better person, he uses this opportunity that he was given at life again, and he earns it by leading a good life. So, in conclusion, Private Ryan is not a tragedy because it doesn't address the characteristics laid out by Aristotle for what tragedy is. It doesn't have a tragic plot in the sense that it meets the characteristics that most tragedies of the time in ancient Greeks had. And finally, it doesn't have a tragic hero. And in fact, it has the opposite of tragic heroes throughout the movie. So I think the biggest thing that my text contributes to the understanding of tragedy, even though it isn't a tragedy, is that even though a movie is sad and has a lot of tragic elements throughout it, doesn't make it a tragedy. Because tragedy, according to the Greek definition, is something much deeper than just things being sad. It's a more concrete, laid out thing than just being sad. And I think a lot of times people get caught up in the idea that English is so subjective and English is so wishy-washy. But then if they understood this, that tragedy has an actual definition that just sad things don't fall into, I think that people would have a better appreciation for English and how it isn't just subjective and kind of stupid in that way. And so Saving Private Ryan really highlights that aspect of tragedy, and not just tragedy, but English as a whole.